Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Alta Live. I am so excited and happy to see you here joining today's discussion on the gray whales of Baja California. If you've seen the current issue of Alta, the gray whale is our cover star. So today we have, well, as I was just telling him, the gray whale guy joining us today, Stephen Swartz. A bit about Stephen L. Swartz. He is a graduate of UC Santa Cruz, where he was awarded his PhD under Dr. Kenneth Norris. Side note, Google Kenneth Norris. It's just like an incredible scientist, marine scientist in his own right. I went down a rabbit hole looking into him. So to learn more, check out Ken Norris. Stephen has researched and published widely on gray whales and their breeding lagoons in Baja. From 1977 to 1982, Steve and Mary Lou Jones conducted the first systematic research of gray whales in Laguna, San Ignacio in Baja. In 2006, along with Jorge Urban, they founded the Laguna San Ignacio Ecosystem Science Program. That's where he is right now, to support and encourage science-based research and monitoring of gray whales and their breeding lagoon areas in Baja. Stephen served as a consultant to the Mexican government's Ministry for the Environment, Natural Resources, and Fisheries, and worked for the Ocean Conservancy, the U.S. Marine Mammal Commission, the National Marine Fisheries Service, and the International Whaling Commission. He retired from federal service in 2011 and now works as a consultant and senior scientist for the non-government environmental and marine conservation organizations. He is the gray whale guy. I'm so honored that he joined us today. Before we dive into our conversation, and of course, I heard you in the survey, we will have pictures of gray whales today. Some brief housekeeping. Alta Live is the digital interview series we do here at Alta Journal. If you are unfamiliar with our magazine, we are a quarterly and award-winning magazine and website focused on California and the West, including Baja. If you like what we do here, we have weekly Wednesday interview series like this for Alta Live. We host a monthly California book club. Our next author is Layla Lalami, and The Other Americans is her book. We've got live events, including events coming up at City Lights Bookstore, Pages for Indie Bookstore Day in Santa Monica. In fact, Stephen's hometown. And free newsletters going out almost every day. So sign up for all of that at altaonline.com. If you like what we do here, please do consider subscribing and becoming a member. It costs $50 a year. You get a hat, you get our Best Bookstores of the West book, and invitations to all sorts of fun parties and stuff, as well as 4 beautiful copies of Alta. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask questions of our guest. You can also please let us know where you're zooming in the chat. It's fun to see. This interview will be recorded and emailed to you later this afternoon, as well as posted to altaonline.com. We're also going to send you links to how you can support the Laguna San Ignacio Ecosystem Science Program and Stephen's work. Articles in Alta related to gray whales, and anything else that might pop up today. So with that, I am far north in Northern California, Novato, California. Stephen, where are you today?
I'm on the southern shore of Laguna San Ignacio in Baja California Sur, Mexico. About
Thank you.
1,700 kilometers from you.
In kilometers. Wow, that's very sciencey. There's a map. There's actually a pull-out map. And correct me if I'm in our current issue. You are here.
Right there. That's where I am located at this moment, and that's where our program is focused.
And this is one of 2 breeding grounds for, correct me, please tell me I'm wrong, or for gray whales in America.
There are actually 3 major, what we call aggregation and breeding areas during the winter months. The winter range is basically from Point Conception all the way to Cabo San Lucas. But along the Baja California coast, right at the border of northern and southern states of Baja California, there is a large lagoon complex known as the Eye of the Rabbit, or Ojo de Liebre. It's also known as Scammons Lagoon, after a famous whaler that discovered it. Then further south is Laguna San Ignacio, which is where we are today. And then further south from there is Bahia Magdalena, which is a huge bay complex. It's a major commercial port, but there are three areas within that large bay that the whales frequent during the winter months. So those are the three: Ojo de Libre in the north, San Ignacio in the middle, and Bahia Magdalena in the south.
And is that in terms of kind of consistent over the course of history, breeding lagoons for gray whales, is that it?
Pretty much. Gray whales are found only, the modern gray whale is found only in the North Pacific, mostly on the Eastern Pacific. There is a Western Pacific population, but it's been critically endangered and depleted, hovering around 300 animals for several decades.
Jeez.
And it's on the IUCN watch list. But the healthy population, or the robust population, is along North American coast, Pacific coast, and it numbers anywhere from 25,000 to right now about 15,000. It oscillates or fluctuates over time.
Why does it fluctuate over time?
In most recent years, it's been problems with food production. Okay, we can dive as deep as you'd like to into climate change and the effect it's having on the Arctic, but that's basically the bottom line. Their food source, which is rather specialized, has been disrupted, as has primary production in the Arctic in general for many Arctic species of birds, fish, marine mammals, and so on. And the gray whale has not been immune to that. It's been affected by it.
Worse. I want to start kind of with you. How did you end up in Laguna, San Ignacio, and studying the gray whale, those 47 years ago?
It was some very, very unique opportunities that came along. I had met a young woman, a whale trainer at SeaWorld, who was going to become my wife in the future. We both enjoyed marine science, marine mammal science, and biology. She was working at SeaWorld, and I took a job there as an educator in between episodes of graduate school. And at the time, the Marine Mammal Protection Act had been passed in 1972, a little bit before we had met. And it basically said that marine mammals, all marine mammals, are federally protected. And if you were to endanger them, threaten them, kill them, hurt them, harm them, disturb them, it was now a federal offense. So no longer a state or local offense. You're now talking federal offense. And Mexico had a concern because at the time, all the ecotourism for gray whale watching was coming from San Diego and Los Angeles on sport fishing boats that were looking for something to do in the winter because it was too cold and nasty on the Pacific coast to go sport fishing. So they were taking ecotourists down to Mexico to look at the breeding gray whales. And that raised a concern. US tourists going into a breeding ground of whales, what's going on there? How many tourists? What are they doing? How many boats do they have? How many whales are there? You know, are the whales concerned at all? And so we basically affiliated ourselves with the Natural History Museum in San Diego, and lo and behold, ended up in the winter of 1977, filling a Volkswagen van full of all our camping gear and an inflatable boat. And off we went to do some reconnaissance down in Mexico. And that's how it all started.
And why the whale? Have you always had an affinity for whales, or the gray whale in particular?
No. Like I said, I started a master's in ichthyology, and I was studying fish. And it wasn't until I took the job at SeaWorld and discovered I was in a gold mine, as it were, of people that knew how to take care of marine mammals. And that was at SeaWorld. And so I just was like a sponge. I just absorbed everything and converted, I guess, if you will.
I like converted to whales. I'm with you.
Yeah, converted to whales. Yeah.
Can you tell us, I want to kind of, walk the line between asking, fourth grader questions and perhaps higher level stuff for those in our audience that already know a ton about whales. But just in terms of the migration journey, I grew up here in Northern California, knowing that, near Point Reyes, knowing that there's certainly whale watching season. But can you tell us exactly kind of where the journey starts and ends and the timeline for the gray whale?
Sure. Actually, it's a similar timeline for all the large, what are called mysticeed or filter feeding whales, like a blue whale or a fin whale or a humpback. These animals require so much food to exist, and they have to store it during the summer months when it's available, and then live off of their body fat the rest of the months when it's not available, that they migrate to places where there's a lot of primary production. And in this case, on this planet, that's at the poles. So let's talk the North Pacific. Okay, from the equator to the north in the summer months, the days get very long. The winds blow hard. Deep nutrient-rich water upwells from the northern Pacific, spills out onto the continental shelf. It mixes with the springtime freshwater melt from ice and snow, and that immediately turns into pea soup, very, very green. So it's primary production. That's immediately fed upon by larger plankton, the zooplankton, and then invertebrates. And in the case of the gray whale, the invertebrates are the ones that form colonies on the ocean floor, on the continental seafloor. So that's where they go in the summer, and they gorge themselves, I mean, literally on tons and tons of food because it's available, storing that up. So then as the seasons change and the days go from full daylight to dark, they migrate. They get out of there because it's not a good place for a warm-blooded, air-breathing animal to spend the winter. And so they migrate south. And during that southward migration, the females will come into estrus and they'll breed with the males as they migrate to their winter grounds, which range, like I said, the winter ranges from Point Conception all the way to Cabo San Lucas on the Pacific side of the Mexican coast. And they move into these protected bays and estuaries along the Mexican coast to continue breeding. And those females that bred the year before have now gestated their calf for 12 months. And so they're near to birth. And so they'll birth their calves and then raise them or nurture them for 3 to 4 months in the protected areas of Baja California. At some point in time, generally right about now, March and April, they leave and start migrating north with that calf and take it on its first sojourn up to the summer feeding grounds. And then after 7 to 9 months with her new calf, she will separate from it and they never see each other again, as far as we know. So it's a 2-year cycle from conception, pregnancy, full term, birth, nursing, and then migrating north and weaning and the separation of the two to complete the life cycle of the gray whale. So that involves summer feeding where the food's the best, and then the winter where there's better protection, warmer waters, and a good place to take care of a young calf that just was born.
As we talk, I hope this is okay. I'm going to share some photos of some gray whales and some of your work. As gorgeous as we both are, I think our audience would like to check them out, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely, sure.
Give me a sec here. Can you tell us a little bit about the mission of your organization?
Yeah, the Laguna San Ignacio Ecosystem Science Program was the invention of Jorge Urban and myself. He's my co-director from the Autonomous University of Baja California Sur in La Paz. And we wanted to develop an academically based monitoring and research field station at Laguna San Ignacio, because it had just been embraced by the new Biosphere Reserve back in actually in the 80s, the Biosphere Reserve of Vizcaíno. It's the world's largest biosphere reserve that Mexico put in place from the border of northern and southern Baja, south of here about 80 kilometers, and then from the Pacific to the Gulf. So it's a huge tract of land. It includes Laguna San Ignacio and Ojo de Liebre lagoons in the north. But there was nobody doing any research or monitoring of what was going on in the lagoons. So Jorge and I came up with this plan that if we could raise funds to put together a little field station, we would invite our colleagues from universities in Mexico, in the US and Canada, turns out Costa Rica, Colombia, even from Spain, to bring their graduate students here to do their thesis research. And that would provide us with a workforce to monitor the whales and the marine environment and all the species that occupy Laguna San Ignacio. I can see we're being attacked by some seagulls outside, so just never mind them. So this worked extremely well, and we started in 2006, and we've just celebrated, I believe it's our 18th year this year of bringing graduate students here, master's and PhD candidates, to do hands-on field work. We support them during 3 months of field work, and then another 3 months when they return to university for all the important stuff like data analysis, writing reports, and publishing articles, and going to conferences and giving their papers, and so on. So we've been able to attract a great variety of our colleagues, some wonderful, really motivated young scientists that are becoming the next generation of marine mammal researchers and managers. So we're very happy with that.
Can you share any exciting discoveries that you've come across in your research or your teams, the grad students that have come out there in these 18 years? What have you unearthed?
Well, a lot of stuff. If you go to our website, sanignaciograyWhales.org, everything we've ever done is all there, including the history of the program, but all of our articles we have regular blogs that go out and annual reports and all that sort of thing. But for me, one of my favorite revelations was that when Mary Lou and I came down in the 70s and early 80s, We used a device called photographic film. You probably remember photographic film, or you've heard of it.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. It was superseded by digital photography, of course, but at the time we took pictures on film, and we precious those are precious images. So we saved them and we carted them around with us as our careers took us different places. So at one point when we were returning to the States and Maryland, I said, I'm tired of lugging these boxes around. We're going to get rid of them. She said, no, no, no. You never get rid of original data because you'll never be able to collect it again. And she was absolutely right. So we got a scanner. We digitally scanned those slides, color slides, Kodochromes, Ektachromes on film that still had good images on them. And we sent to our crew chief, Sergio Martinez. He's a doctor at the University in La Paz, and he also runs our field program here. And he looked at all those marks, and he manages our photographic identification data logs and database. And he said, I'm already seeing matches. And I said, matches with what? He said, with whales that we photographed the last 3 years in Laguna San Ignacio. And I said, are you kidding me? He said, no. So if you do some quick math, if we photographed a female in 1977, first winter we were down there, and she had a calf, could have been her first calf. She might have been even older than that, but to have her first calf, she had to be at least 7 to 9 years old. So if you add another 50 years to that, to bring it up to when we just recently identified her and photographed her again with a calf, you know, these whales, some of them are in their 50s and 60s, and they're still coming back to Laguna San Ignacio. They're still breeding, producing perfectly healthy calves. So I was floored. I mean, I never expected them to be that old, but they're as old as we are. So we've sort of grown up with this cohort of whales. So we feel very close to them.
Wait, gray whales can give birth into their 50s?
Yes, yes. Not all cetaceans breed until they die, but gray whales do, and some of the other mysticetes do as well. Some of the odontocetes, the toothed whales like orcas, and some of the beaked whales that we understand a little bit about, very mysterious animals that live in the deep sea, but we're learning. Some of those will stop breeding, the females will, and they play more of a social role as matriarchs to the social groups of social odontocetes or social toothed whales. But the gray whales, no, the females will continue to breed until they're done.
Which is, how long does a female gray whale typically live?
The oldest gray whale that we know of is unfortunately one that was harvested by the whaling industry in the 1960s, but she was 75 years old and she was pregnant the day she was killed.
Whoa.
The living animals that we're looking at, as I said, are in their 50s and 60s. So we're going to keep taking pictures. We're going to keep re-identifying what we call the old timers. We got 2 this winter, actually, of the 55 or so that we now have that we've recaptured photographically over that period of time since the 70s and 80s.
So you've gotten to know some of these whales.
We've gotten to know them. Whether they know us, we're not sure. But they don't seem to be bothered when we follow them around taking their picture or want to get a measurement of their calf or something. They're quite amenable to that. So they're accustomed to us. They're also accustomed to well-behaved whale watchers. And so they're not frightened or anything. And they just, we're part of their environment and part of the winter landscape that they come to see they come to experience every winter.
I want to talk about the whale watchers and tourism. First question, what is this device? These images, by the way, I have grabbed from Stephen's website, Laguna San Ignacio Ecosystem Science Center program. What is this device that I'm seeing here on a whale, and what kind of, how do you track them, etc.?
That was a prototype, a very early form of what's called a digital tag. Okay, it's attached with suction cups. So it stays on everywhere from a moment to maybe 5 or 6 hours at best before it's sloughed off or the whale kicks it off. And in that package, in this particular one, was a transmitter to transmit a signal so we could follow the whale. It also had a depth sensor so we could tell how deep the whale was. And from that, look at surfacing and dive profiles to see how many times it surfaced to breathe. And I believe it also had some temperature sensors in it as well. This has led to very, very sophisticated D tags, as they're called. They're about the size of a cell phone. They also go on with suction cups, but they do remarkable things, like just with all the different sensors that are in them now, the electronics, you get the data set when you recover one of these things and download it to a computer and run it through some software, and you get a little whale icon that starts dancing across your screen and shows you how deep it's going, how long it's diving, where it's going, pitch, yaw, up, down, every direction in the world, what sounds it makes, what sounds it's hearing, all those sorts of things. So the technology started with something with that black electrician's tape and a wire sticking out of it. Come a long way, come a long way.
So this is on your website. You have kind of the every year's seasonal team of scientists who are kind of with you throughout that season. Is it competitive to get into this group? It seems like so much fun. You get to go down to Baja, study whales with a bunch of people who are just as excited about it. How do you get into this?
Well, it's competitive in sense. Students that are interested in the program approach either Sergio Martinez is our field chief for San Ignacio, or Lorena Vitrina, who's our field chief for the Bahia Magdalena program, which started about 5 years ago. We started a second front, if you will, to look at the gray whales to the south of us. And it's an academic program. It's part of their academic training. It's a 6-month commitment. Again, 3 months in the field and 3 months back at university reporting and writing. And if they want to give it a try, we'll give them an opportunity to come through a season and see how they like it. We've had some students, well, like our field chief, Sergio just celebrated his 15th year with us here. And he's been a great field chief. He continues to run the show and do a fantastic job with it. Some of our students have been here 4, 5, 6 winters, come back, and then they graduate and move on to their careers. They get jobs, different places, and we lose them. So we always bring in some freshmen, some undergrads to get a taste of what's going on here. Some of them take to it and others of them don't. For example, we had a very talented young woman who came here for a winter, and she said, "This is a fantastic place. I'll never forget this experience. The whales are just bizarre. Having wild animals like that come up to you and take a look at you is just overwhelming at times. And the lake's full of birds, full of fish, the mountains, the water, everything is great. But I want to work somewhere where it's not cold, where it's not windy, where it's not dusty and dirty all the time. An indoor arrangement." She said, "I think I'd like to be a geneticist." I said, "Perfect. We need talented geneticists to help us understand what's going on, not only with whale populations, but with all wildlife populations. So you can definitely find a niche if you get into genetics. It'll treat you well as a career." And so, that sort of story happens over and over again.
Sure. I'm curious about tourism. I took my family to Cabo San Lucas over New Year's, and we saw there are tons of whale watching tours. You land at the airport and they come up to you. What is for someone like as a scientist or researcher, how does tourism, especially kind of, petting the whales is a big part, a selling point of these whale excursions. Do the whales like it? Is it good for them? How does the scientific community feel about this?
It can be pretty much benign if it's well managed, but it also could be extremely detrimental if it's not well managed. If the enthusiasm of the whale watchers overrides and overstresses the whales, they will leave, and then the object of their affection is now gone. So a well-managed whale watching program basically puts the ecotourists in the presence of whales, but it doesn't pursue the whales. It lets the whales make the decision whether they want to come and investigate a boat full of people or not. Now, in all fairness, most of the gray whales are not interested in boats full of people. I can't put a firm number on it, but I'd say probably 90% is fair enough to say that they are there to breed. Their hormones are raging, or they've just given birth to a calf and their full attention is in nurturing that calf. But there are a few, because they're mammals, they're curious and they're not afraid. Most of the pongueros in commercial whale watching operations are licensed and trained, and many of them come from the areas where they conduct the whale watching themselves. They're fishermen that have grown up there and they know the whales, they know the situation, and they're very, very good about that. So they will put their passengers out amongst the whales, and the whales can hear the boats because they're producing low frequency sound. Again, their mammals are curious, especially the young ones, because everything's new. They were just born a month or two ago in most instances. And so they'll come over and take a look. And cetaceans in general are also very tactile. They like to touch and rub. From the moment they're born in the water, they're always in contact with another member of their group, okay? In this case, a mother and its calf. And so if they come over to a boat and rub against the boat and the people rub against them, it's kind of like rubbing a new puppy. You know, pretty soon it's leaning against your leg and your knee, and then it's in your lap. Okay. Well, these don't get in your lap, but they will hang around as long as you're willing to pet them for a while until mom says it's time to go, and then they leave. And oftentimes even adult whales will stick around for just a moment or two to have a look, have a listen, and then they go on their way.
So it's usually, in terms of tourists interacting, it's usually a baby, it's a calf.
No, not necessarily. Adults do it as well.
All right, folks, I'm going to stop the share and dive into some more questions. We've got a ton. Okay, so what about I don't know how much you've worked. I know you've worked a lot with the government in Mexico. Are there differences, for better or for worse, between American kind of federal focus on animal conservation and the Mexican government's focus on conservation?
Well, they're similar because they have similar objectives. I think that Mexico is given credit for leading the way in a lot of marine conservation, where other countries in the world, including the US, maybe have lagged a bit behind. Mexico has been very forward in setting aside, for example, I'll use the gray whale aggregation and breeding areas in Mexico. Beginning in the 70s and the early 80s, they started setting aside these areas as protected areas for breeding whales, as well as the other wildlife that came along with it. And then in the 1980s, mid to late 1980s, they did establish the Vizcaíno Biosphere Reserve, which is a huge tract of land and water that protected not only the water, but terrestrial areas where there were indigenous species, plants, lizards, reptiles, other terrestrial mammals like the antelope that's found in the peninsula, found nowhere else in the world. And so they didn't want these animals to be squeezed out by development. And so they set aside places for them to continue their normal lives, as well as allowing, controlled growth in various areas for the Mexican people themselves. So I think they've shown a real leadership role in many of these areas for marine and terrestrial wildlife conservation. The battle's never over. There's always going to be growth. There's always going to be pressure to develop undeveloped areas. So I think it's just a mindset that hopefully the leadership that makes the decisions will realize, we're not alone on this planet. We share it with a lot of other species, and they also deserve a place to live, a healthy environment, as well as the people do. So we have to seek a compromise. We have to seek a balance.
Mark in the chat asks, didn't the Mexican government make the first move towards protecting the elephant seal long before the US government?
That is correct.
Sue asks, where does your organization get funding? Are you a nonprofit?
We are all nonprofit, non-government funded. Our 501c3 is the Ocean Foundation, which is a Washington, D.C. based ocean advocacy organization. We are one of about 70 programs that they sponsor. The majority of them are not science programs, or one of the half a dozen or so that are a research program as opposed to a pure advocacy program. And, they provide all the support we need to handle all of the paperwork involved with taxes and soliciting nonprofit funds. But we receive generous donations and support from a great community of organizations, nonprofits, and individuals that have followed us over the years. All of our researchers have proven their worth, that we produce what we say we can do, and we continue to do it, and they believe in that, and they want to see us continue. So we're very, very pleased and very, very fortunate to have such a great community of people supporting us. Always looking for more people to join in because there are always bills to pay.
We will send you all a link, philanthropists in the audience. Question for you, and maybe this is kind of a Northern California or Central California question. I assume you're familiar with the orca attack on migrating gray whales. Is that something, my reading about it was that this was very rare. Is it truly rare that an orca would attack, or orcas would attack, adult gray whales? Are you seeing an increase in that? Was this just a one-off rare situation?
The statistics aren't for us to say whether it's rare or common or increasing or decreasing. Orcas are like wolves or wild dogs or hyenas. They're social, even like dolphins when it comes to fish. They make a living by hunting as a pack. They're very strategic, they're very tactical, they communicate, they use all sorts of strategies to catch their prey, and they are the only bona fide predator of the gray whale.
Mm.
Gray whales have to deal with, ocean-going ship traffic, with entanglement in ocean fishing gear, with loud noises, and things like that throughout their range because they migrate along an extremely developed North American Pacific coastline. But as far as biology is concerned, their only known and true original predator is the orca, the killer whale. And oftentimes you'll see, and this helps us to identify individual gray whales, white rake marks, scratch marks on the whales. And these are the telltale signs left by an encounter with an orca that tried to attack the whale, created those scars. They turn white rather than regenerating the dark gray pigment that the gray whales are born with. And so we can tell that animal did meet some orcas, but it survived. It got loose, got free.
Wow. Question in the Q&A from CE Corngold. I am very worried about the proposed deep sea floor raking for, is it lithium? Could you address this, Dr. Swartz?
We should all be concerned about any type of DC mining or harvesting of minerals there because there are creatures that live down there.
So yes.
End of point.
Yes, you should worry about it. We all should be worrying about it.
We all should be worried about it and find out as much as you can, educate yourself, and let your leadership in your state, local community, or wherever, federal government, know what you're thinking about that.
Sue, and I imagine Sue Mills asks, and I imagine it's the same response. What about deep sea trawling?
Same thing. And deep sea trawling in particular, in my lifetime, was the big culprit with the deep sea corals, which were unknown to even exist. When you drag the big nets across the deep sea over these coral beds, you just tear them down. You just destroy them. It's like plowing the the Great Barrier Reef, which is above the photic zone, but same sort of thing. So all this stuff that happens out of sight, out of mind has an effect, has an impact on the environment, and we should be very careful about those types of activities.
Sue also asks, can you recommend, I'll say 1 or 2 books for those that want to learn more about gray whales? What's the fantastic book?
Well, historically, if you want to go back to an early account of the U.S. whaling fishery, which is written by Charles Scammon, a fellow whose lagoon is named after, who Ojai de Liberty Lagoon is named after, wrote a exquisite, 18th century overview of the entire inner workings and of the whaling industry. It was called the Yankee whaling industry at the time. There's a lot of great history in that book as far as the extent of it, where it went, what they did, and so on. More contemporary, there's a small monograph by Alan Woolman and Dale Rice called Ischioticus robustus, the gray whale, and it was their scientific findings of all of the examinations they did of gray whales that were taken in the whaling industry by the U.S. in the 1960s. Moving more forward, more recently, there's a great book by Dr. Jim Sumich from Oregon State University called The Gray Whale, Ischioticus robustus, and Jim is big into physiology and growth and adaptations, and so it's A to Z on all of the intricacies of gray whales and how they evolved and how they operate in the ocean. Then I wrote a little book in 2014 called Lagoon Time, a guide to Laguna San Ignacio. And it basically is a mix of a historical account of what Mary Lou and I did from 1977 to 82, but then also what happened to this region during times when they wanted to industrialize it, and more and more pressure for growth and how it was set aside as a marine protected area. So those are some examples of gray whale books going from way back in the 19th century all the way up to current times.
Sue is asking Sue, we'll do our best and find links to all of those, include them in our write-up that we will send you in an email. Everyone who's registered for this event will get an email with links to Dr. Stephen's work, how to learn more. We'll find those books for you and send those in a link. Last question for you, Stephen, before you get back to the whales. What is the biggest threat facing gray whales in Baja present day? And what can we do to support your work and those whales?
Well, I hate to jump to a whole nother latitude, and it's probably oversaid, spoken in our times, but it's climate change. Climate change is disrupting marine food chains that have been established over hundreds, in some cases thousands of years, that many marine species, including gray whales, rely on, as I mentioned earlier in today's discussion, that they have to get to obtain the tons and tons of food they need to live off of all year long and to reproduce and to migrate. This applies to other marine species as well. The warming of the seas, the disruption of the winds, the loss of sea ice, which is the freshwater input to these systems that make the food grow, are being disrupted at an alarming rate. Now, the paleogeologists tell us, paleooceanographers, excuse me, tell us that these changes have taken these systems have developed over long periods of geologic time. But what we're seeing now are modifications or disruptions of these changes that are happening in mere decades. And that's much too fast for marine wildlife to adapt, to have a chance to adjust, to find a new feeding area. Hopefully the feeding area would be reestablished somewhere, to change their migratory routes and so on. So the gray whale is known as Escherichthus robustus. I firmly believe because it evolved along a coastal environment, which is very dynamic with waves and storms and continental plates and shelves and all kinds of things going on all the time, that they can roll with the punches pretty well if you give them a chance. So don't give up on the gray whale. They'll hang in there. Their numbers rise and fall with these cycles that we described earlier, but they're permanent members of the marine environment, and we should be able to enjoy them and appreciate them and learn from them for years to come.
Stephen Swartz, you are so fun to talk to about gray whales, and I imagine all sorts of science and marine life. And I am so grateful that you took the time. Folks, I reached out to the organization, and Stephen came right back and said, I'd be happy to do it. And you are just the gray whale guy. I'm so grateful that you took the time to speak with Alta Live and answer all of our questions. It's been a delight speaking with you today.
Well,
Thank you.
Beth, it was an honor and a pleasure, and I'm representing, many years of really bright, energetic students that have done so much work to bring our knowledge forward on the gray whales. That hats off to all of them. It's a pleasure to work with them, and I'm looking forward to many more years of it. And for this opportunity to speak to your audience is just a gift. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. Please come next week. We're going to talk about another Alta article, this time with a Joshua Tree-based fashion designer, Amanda Zoe. So we're taking it 180 and talking desert fashion next week. Again, Stephen Swartz, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our audience, and we will see you next week. Take care.